Why was everyone laughing at her the moment she stepped off the bus? The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked pavement of Fort Blackstone, that infamous training ground whispered about in barracks and mess halls across the country. The kind of place where spirits weren't just tested, they were broken. Recruits stumbled out of the transport, blinking against the heat. Boots hit gravel, voices barked orders, but only one figure moved differently. Just a fraction too late, Maya Rodriguez. She clutched her duffel strapped tight, late to formation, sweat already gathering at her hairline. 20 minutes late, in fact, because of a delayed flight. And in this world, lateness wasn't a small mistake. It was blood in the water. A voice boomed across the courtyard, low and jagged like gravel dragged under steel. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Sergeant Kane. He emerged from the shadow of the barracks, all leathered skin and scars that didn't heal. The right way, eyes sharp as glass shards, he had the gait of a predator. Not fast, not rushed, but certain. Every recruit stiffened at his presence, except for Maya, who froze, caught in the spotlight of his disdain. Rodriguez, I presume? His boots circled her slow, crunching gravel, letting the silence drag until every recruit's smirk turned into a grin. She held her ground. Yes, Sergeant. I can hear you. Yes, Sergeant. The words came out stronger, but not strong enough to hide the tremor of someone already marked as prey. Kane leaned in close. She could smell stale coffee on his breath. You see these men behind me? They've been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks of blood, sweat, and tears. They've earned their place. You? You're an experiment, a checkbox on some politician's diversity quota. But don't worry. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'll treat you exactly the same as everyone else, which means I'm going to break you. Laughter rippled through the ranks. Behind Kane stood 12 recruits, each carrying that same half-amused, half-cruel look, a giant with shoulders like an ox. Jackson grinned wide, arms crossed as if this show was for him. Beside him, a wiry boy with nervous eyes, Stevens, shifted restlessly, fidgeting with his gear. The roles were already clear. Predators and prey, Kane barked. Drop and give me 50. Maya hit the concrete instantly, palms slapping against the baking surface. At first, the push-ups came easy. She'd trained for this. She'd prepared herself. But preparation under shade was nothing like Georgia heat baking down on a raw recruit's body by the 20th. Rep, sweat poured into her eyes, stinging, blinding. Her arms began to tremble. Around her, the recruits formed a loose circle. Commentary rolling like cheap theater. Come on, sweetheart, you can do it, Jackson mocked, voice dripping with fake encouragement. Maybe get her some knee pads, Stevens added, drawing a round of laughter. Her palms burned the concrete, scraping flesh until it turned raw. Still, she pushed. 49. 50. Kane's boot appeared inches from her face. On your feet, Rodriguez. Time for the real fun. The next hour was torment dressed as training. The obstacle course sprawled before them. Ropes, walls, barbed wire, mud, to the others. It was brutal. To her, it was humiliation waiting in every corner. The rope climb came first. 30 feet of hemp tearing at her already bleeding hands. She made it halfway before her grip failed. The fall knocked the wind out of her lungs above her. Jeers rained down. Try the kiddie course. I've seen grandmothers climb faster. 3 more times she tried. 3 more times she fell. On the 4th, through sheer pain and stubbornness, she reached the bell at the top. No applause, no nod of respect. Just Kane's voice, cutting her victory down to dust. Congratulations. You managed to do what everyone else did on their first try. Move on. And so it went. The wall traverse left her bruised and battered. The tire run had her stumbling while the others breezed through. By the time she belly crawled through the final mud pit, she looked less like a soldier and more like a broken body dragged through war. That night, The mess hall became another battlefield. She sat alone, bandaging raw palms, antiseptic stinging like fire. Around her, voices carried. "Did you see her on the rope?" I thought she was going to cry. $20 says she's gone by Friday. "How? I give her till Wednesday." Their laughter echoed. She ignored it, her gaze fixed instead on the faint scar at her wrist. At first glance, it was nothing. A childhood mark, maybe. But in the harsh light, when the angle caught just right, it looked like something alive, coiled, waiting, patient, a serpent, curled to strike. She flexed her fingers, the scar twitching with her pulse. They thought she was weak. They thought she'd break. They thought she was prey. She let them think it. When the lights dimmed and the hall quieted, Maya allowed herself the smallest of smiles. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The next morning came with sirens screaming at 0500 hours, slicing through sleep like a blade. "Rise and shine, princess!" Jackson's voice roared across the barracks. "Time for another day of embarrassing yourself." Laughter followed, but this time there was a different edge. Meaner, hungrier, mockery had turned to cruelty. Stevens appeared at her bunk, waving a slip of paper. "Current odds are 3-1 you wash out before Friday. I've got $5 riding on Wednesday. Don't let me down." Maya laced her boots silently. Something felt off. Too soft. She tugged one free, and shaving cream oozed out like toothpaste. The barracks exploded with laughter. Kane's whistle cut through the noise. "Formation in 5. Anyone late spends quality time with me and a mop bucket." Maya grabbed her spare boots, feet squishing with cream, and sprinted. She barely made it into line before Kane's eyes locked onto her. "Mismatched footwear. Rodriguez, what's wrong with your boots?" "Nothing, Sergeant." "Nothing?" His whisper turned sharp, dangerous. "You show up looking like a homeless person and tell me nothing's wrong?" She dropped again. 100 push-ups. Hands screaming. Shoulders burning. She didn't cry. Didn't ask for relief. She simply endured. Teeth clenched. Body breaking but never collapsing. At the range, her humiliation only grew. The best rifles were gone. She was left with a battered relic, its barrel worn smooth. When the live-fire exercise began, the others fired clean. Shots, moving cover to cover, Maya's turn came. She squeezed the trigger. Click. Jam. The air filled with Kane's disgust. Of course, it's Rodriguez. Weak link breaks down when it matters. He made her strip the rifle in front of everyone. Her hand shook, not from fear, but from pain. Still, she worked. The jam cleared, the rifle reassembled, her breaths ragged. But Kane wasn't done. Since Rodriguez decided to hold up the exercise, she gets to demonstrate proper malfunction procedures. Low crawl, razor wire, dough. Obstacles stretched 100 yards. Barbed wire strung low enough to tear skin with the smallest mistake. She dropped, belly to the mud, every inch agony. Wire snagged her uniform, scraped her back, tore her shoulder until blood seeped. Mud filled her mouth, her chest heaved. Still, she moved inch by inch. Behind her, Kane's voice cut through the night. "Notice how Rodriguez moves like a wounded animal. This is why some people don't belong here." The wire felt endless, claws dragging at her skin, tearing, pulling. By the time she rolled out the other side, she looked shredded, barely human. "Congratulations, Rodriguez," Kane said flatly. "You've shown us all how not to handle failure. I hope you're proud." That evening, things got worser. Spare uniform, cut to ribbons, her toiletries mixed into foul paste. Her bunk sabotaged, and later, when she thought she'd found quiet in the showers. Jackson, Stevens, and Morrison waited. Look who finally decided to clean up. Jackson smirked, blocking the exit. "About time. You've been stinking up the place." Morrison sneered. She turned the furthest shower on, water hissing over her bruised skin. Steam rose, relief flickered. Then Jackson twisted the knob. Scalding heat blasted down, burning skin red in seconds. Maya gasped, tried to pull away. Morrison blocked her path. Stevens laughed, pretending concern. Oops, water heater must be. Acting up again, trapped between the boiling spray and the three men. Maya didn't flinch. She studied them instead. Every detail, Jackson's left side, weak from an old football injury. Stevens' pocket, where his inhaler bulged. Morrison's scar under his chin. She memorized it all. And when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, calm, cold. You're right. Maintenance should fix that. She reached past Jackson, twisted the knob off herself, and walked barefoot past all three. No anger, no outburst, just silence, and something in her eyes that unsettled them in ways laughter never could. At the door, she turned back, dripping water across the tile. Thanks for the reminder about equipment maintenance. I'll be sure to pass that along. That night, lying in her bunk with skin still burning, Maya stared at the ceiling while the others slept. They believed they'd broken her. They believed she was weak. They were wrong. In the quiet dark, she flexed her fingers. The scar on her wrist pulsed faintly, like something alive, coiled and waiting. And for the first time since. Stepping off the bus, Maya Rodriguez smiled. They had no idea. The mouse was about to show her teeth. Why did the alarms sound at midnight? And why was her heartbeat calmer than everyone else's? The shriek tore through the barracks like broken glass. Red emergency lights flooding the room with eerie shadows. Recruits jolted awake, confused. Voices tangling in the dark. Metal bunks clanged, boots slammed, curses filled the air. Chaos, pure and immediate. Maya slid from her bunk in one fluid motion. Not fast, not panicked, just precise. She moved with a stillness that stood out against the chaos, pulling gear onto her body in practiced order. Vest, boots, rifle, helmet, every strap and buckle falling into place as if she'd done it in her sleep 100 times before. Across the room, Stevens dropped half his magazine in shaking hands. What the hell is happening? His voice cracked, trembling. Another one of Kane's mind games, Jackson muttered. Though his bravado had a jagged edge, he loved screwing with our sleep. The storm outside rattled windows, thunder rolling across the base. In the flashes of lightning, Maya caught faces twisted in fear, their nerves frayed, their confidence shaken. She tightened her rifle sling. Not fear, not confusion. Something else filled her chest. Anticipation. The recruits spilled outside, the night air thick and wet. Smoke already coiling across the training yard. Sergeant Kane stood waiting, arms crossed, his silhouette carved sharp against the red lights. He didn't need to shout for silence. The storm carried his authority. Listen up, maggots. His voice thundered. Intelligence reports hostile infiltration of a civilian compound. Your mission is simple. Navigate the target area. Neutralize threats. Extract the package. Rules of engagement are live fire. Miss a target. Hit a civilian. Dummy. Or die. You fail. Any questions? Maya's eyes scanned the fog-draped course stretched before them. It looked chaotic to the others. Scattered obstacles, smoke machines belching haze, civilian mannequins hidden in the mist. But to her, it wasn't chaos. It was deliberate design. Sightlines, kill zones, blind spots, traps. A pattern as clear as writing. Her heart didn't race. It slowed. Kane's eyes landed on her like a predator sensing prey. Rodriguez, since you've been such a stellar performer, you get to go first. Try not to embarrass yourself more than usual. The recruits chuckled, but it wasn't the same as before. Something hung in the air. Unease. The shower incident had left a shadow they couldn't name. Maya stepped to the line. Her battered rifle felt different tonight, not clumsy, not foreign, like an extension of her hands, like an old memory settling back into place. Begin. Kane barked. Maya vanished. 1 second she was there. The next, gone into the fog. The recruits strained their eyes, searching. Jackson squinted. Where the hell did she go? 30 seconds later, a target popped. A crack echoed. Metal rang. Perfect shot. But the sound didn't come from one direction. It seemed to slip, bend, echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. More targets rose. More cracks. Each one surgical. Each one precise. The course was designed to take 15 minutes. Maya bent time in half. Her movements defied explanation. Cameras blinked static. Sensors tripped randomly. Technology worth millions made useless by shadows and silence, Stevens whispered. How is she moving so fast? Nobody answered. Kane's face shifted. What began as smug expectation hardened into something else. Recognition. He knew every trap on that course. He designed it himself. What she was doing wasn't possible for a raw recruit. Not for anyone who hadn't been born into darkness. 8 minutes later, she emerged from the far end of the fog. Uniform clean, rifle steady, breathing calm, not a single mistake. Silence gripped the staging area. Kane stepped forward, his voice lower now, stripped of mockery. How? Maya's eyes met his. Training. Sergeant. What kind of training? The kind that keeps you alive. Her words carried no pride, no boast, just truth. The recruits shifted uncomfortably. They'd seen something, felt it, something that didn't belong in this world. Jackson tried to speak, but his voice cracked. That's impossible. Nobody shoots like that. Nobody moves like that. Maya turned. In the red wash of the emergency lights, her eyes looked darker, deeper, as if they'd seen wars none of them could imagine. You'd be surprised what's possible when you stop limiting yourself. The rest of the squad stumbled through the course one by one. Struggling, cursing, failing, none came close. None dared look too long at her when they finished. By the time they marched back to the barracks in the thin breath of dawn, whispers followed her like shadows. She moved like a ghost. Did you see those shots? Some weren't even possible angles. She wasn't even breathing hard. Inside, Jackson leaned close to Stevens. Remember the showers Stevens swallowed? She didn't fight back. She just watched, like she was memorizing us. Planning something? Morrison muttered, but when they entered the barracks, conversation died. Maya stood at the threshold, framed by dim light. Her wrist caught a glint, the scar twisting faintly, alive in the shadows. Sweet dreams, she whispered that night. Terror took new form. Jackson woke to boots falling apart, sliced so cleanly they disintegrated in his hands. Stevens found his rifle disassembled, reassembled wrong, useless. Morrison's uniform shredded into confetti, and beside each bunk, drawn carefully in the dust, a serpent curled to strike. Its eyes seemed to glimmer, following them even in the dark. None of them slept. Not a sound came from Maya's corner. She lay still, silent, eyes open to the ceiling, listening. The mouse had shed her skin. Something else had emerged, and the real training was only beginning. Why did the storm feel different that night? As if the thunder itself carried a warning. By evening, the rain came in sheets, hammering the roof of Fort Blackstone with the relentlessness of machine gun fire. Lightning split the sky into jagged scars, white light turning windows into mirrors. Inside the barracks, recruits tossed in uneasy sleep, rolling against thin pillows, muttering dreams they'd never remember. Maya lay still, awake, listening, every instinct she'd buried for weeks. Stirred now, whispering sharp warnings at the edge of her consciousness. This wasn't weather. It was cover. And storms like this rarely came without predators waiting in the dark. At 0223 hours, instinct became truth. The explosion shook the ground like a fist slamming down from the heavens. Glass rattled in their frames. Bunks trembled. Recruits bolted. Upright, wide-eyed, hair plastered to sweaty foreheads. Alarms screamed next, wailing across the compound. Sirens colliding with thunder until the night felt alive with terror. What the hell? Jackson began, but the intercom cut him off. Sergeant Kane's voice crackled through static, hard and brittle, tinged with something none of them had ever heard before: fear. All personnel, this is not a drill. Hostile infiltration, Maine. Compound breached. Multiple armed intruders inside perimeter. All recruits remain in barracks until further notice. I repeat, not a drill. The words hollowed the air. 12 recruits froze, their training colliding with raw survival panic. Morrison dove under his bunk. Stevens fumbled at his rifle, hands shaking so hard he dropped the magazine. Jackson, usually the loudest voice in the room, stood paralyzed, chest heaving like a man drowning on dry land. Outside the windows, muzzle flashes lit the storm like fireflies. Shouts in a language none of them recognized carried over the thunder. Automatic gunfire ripped through the night. Maya moved, not fast, not frantic, just silent. She slipped from her bunk, boots laced, before anyone noticed she was gone. She crossed the barracks floor without a sound, her shadow melting toward the door while the others argued about whether to follow Kane's orders. Stevens spotted her at the last second. "Rodriguez, where the hell are you going?" His voice cracked, but by the time they turned, she was gone. The storm swallowed her. Security cameras would later baffle investigators. At 0227 hours, grainy feeds showed impossible things. Shadows that moved independently of their sources. Glimpses of something dropping from ventilation grates. Equipment flickering out, not damaged, but simply failing. In some frames, there was nothing at all. Just empty corridors where there should have been movement. But Maya wasn't a shadow. She was purpose moving through chaos. 6 intruders, Eastern European accents, military-grade rifles, formation crisp, professional. This wasn't random terror. This was precision, and someone on the inside had told them where to strike. Maya counted them as easily as most people counted heartbeats. One stood guard at the rear entrance, rifle sweeping the hall. He never heard her drop behind him, never felt the pressure on his neck before the world went black. She caught his body, lowering him gently so the floor wouldn't betray her. 2 manned the communications room. One cursed at his dead radio, slapping it against his palm. He didn't finish the motion. Maya slid from beneath the console like smoke, hands snapping, breath leaving his lungs. His partner turned, confused, and saw nothing. Just silence swallowing silence. Then darkness. Cameras died one by one. The 3rd and 4th man never stood a chance. A sudden blackout, power cut with surgical precision, dropped the command center into shadow. One reached for his night vision goggles, fingers trembling, only to feel steel coil his throat. He clawed at the invisible snare until blackness claimed him. The other spun, eyes wide, catching only a flash, eyes glinting like an animal's, and a scar pulsing on a wrist when the backup lights flickered. 4 intruders were gone. Only 2 remained. Inside the command center, their leader, a scarred man with dead eyes, barked into his radio, voice breaking under the weight of confusion. "Dmitri? Alexei? Report! Report!" Static. He shouted orders, his calm unraveling. The hostages, base staff huddled in the corner, flinched at every sound. "This is impossible," the leader spat. "Who is doing this?" The answer fell from the ceiling. The grate above them dropped, and with it, Maya. She landed in silence, her body folding into a crouch, her rifle steady. The 5th intruder spun, finger tightening on the trigger. Too slow. She moved before the sound of his rifle reached the air, crossing the floor like water. His round sparked against concrete, useless. By the time his magazine clicked empty, she was already there, her strike folding him into unconsciousness. The leader backed toward the hostages, gun raised. "Stay back." His voice broke. "I'll kill them." Maya didn't stop. She bent physics, body shifting, flowing, refusing to be where bullets traveled. He fired, rounds ripping empty air. And then she was on him. Wrist twisting his weapon away, a calculated strike dropping him like a puppet with cut strings. Silence returned. The hostages stared, trembling, as Maya tied the intruders with their own gear, stacking weapons neatly against the wall. When the quick reaction force finally breached the doors, rifles high, they stopped dead. 6 professional killers lay unconscious, bound, defanged, and at the center of it all, Maya Rodriguez sat quietly on a chair, uniform barely wrinkled, rifle slung calm across her chest. What happened here? The team leader demanded, eyes darting between her and the bodies. Maya looked up, her face plain, forgettable. The same face that had been mocked hours before for failing a rope climb. I hid in a supply closet when the shooting started. She said quietly, when I came out, they were already like this. Maybe they fought each other. The explanation didn't fit. Not with the neat stacks of gear. Not with the unbroken silence. But the team leader said nothing. How do you question? The impossible? Back in the barracks, whispers clung to the air like smoke. The recruits had heard the gunfire stop. They'd seen lights flicker, heard corridors fall silent. Something had moved through the base. Something that didn't breathe like them. Didn't stumble, didn't fear. Jackson stared at her across the room, his mouth dry. Rodriguez? What really happened out there? She looked at him, her face unreadable, calm, but her wrist caught the faint glow of the emergency light, the scar shifting like something alive beneath her skin. I told you, she said softly. I hid in a closet. But Jackson didn't believe it. Not after what he'd seen, not after what he hadn't seen. And for the first time since he'd stepped into Fort Blackstone, Jackson, the biggest, loudest, strongest recruit, felt small. The storm raged on outside. Inside, silence fell. And in that silence, something ancient stirred in the shadows of Maya's wrist. The serpent, the mouse was gone forever. What remained was far more dangerous. Why would a decorated colonel drive through the mist before dawn for a single recruit? At 06:00 sharp, the black sedan cut across the fog like a blade through silk. Its headlights sliced the parade ground, scattering shadows against the walls. Of Fort Blackstone, soldiers straightened instinctively, even without orders. Everyone knew the weight of that car. Colonel Marcus Harrison stepped out. 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars. A Medal of Honor he never wore, but everyone knew about. 30 years in special operations etched into his posture. His stare, his silence. He was carved from granite and tempered in fire. A man who made even seasoned officers swallow their breath when he passed. But this morning, his steel-gray eyes carried something else. Confusion and fear. He'd spent the night reviewing reports that didn't make sense. Footage that shouldn't exist. Files that rattled against locked memories. 6 professional terrorists neutralized without a sound. Hostages freed without injury. Security systems shorting out one by one. Like they'd been erased by a ghost. And always, in the grainy footage, glimpses, shadows moving wrong. Something dropping from vents, strikes too precise to be human, and once, a wrist. A scar that didn't look like a scar. Sergeant Kane met him at the gate, his usual swagger absent. Sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cool morning. "Colonel, sir, we weren't expecting. Where's the footage?" Harrison's voice cut like steel. "Sir, the official report. The official report said what it was told to say." Harrison didn't blink. "Footage now." Kane swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Minutes later, in the dim of the briefing room, the colonel stood with arms folded as grainy images flickered across the screen. The storm had distorted the feeds, but not enough to hide everything. Shadows that moved with intent. Men dropping silently. Weapons vanishing from racks without hands to claim them. "Run it again," Harrison ordered. Kane hesitated. "Sir." The investigation concluded. "Run it." The video replayed, camera 15. The command center corridor, a flash of movement dropping from a ventilation grate, the image blurred with static. But Harrison leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Freeze. Sector 7. Enhance. Pixels fractured under zoom, but Harrison's trained eye saw it. Not a weapon, not a uniform. A mark, small, circular, burned into flesh on a wrist. A serpent, his throat tightened. Memories he'd buried clawed back to the surface. Missions whispered about in rooms without windows. Stories traded in hushed tones over whiskey after midnight. Shadows that bled through walls. Targets gone without explanation. Ghosts who left only rumors behind. Harrison's voice cracked low, almost reverent. Jesus Christ. Kane shifted uneasily. Sir? That's a black viper mark. The words fell like a thunderclap. Kane went pale. Even he had heard the stories. Black vipers. The unit that didn't officially exist. Operators who had no names, no records, no bodies when they died. The kind of ghost soldiers whispered about but never expected to meet. And one was here, hiding as a failing recruit. Get me the personnel files, Harrison said, voice cold. All of them. Sir, that's highly irregular. Sergeant. Harrison's whisper carried more menace than a shout. 6 professionals were neutralized by someone who doesn't exist. If you want to argue procedure, do it with someone who's still alive tomorrow. Kane moved without another word. The files arrived. 12 recruits, normal parameters, average scores. Mediocrity stamped across the pages. But Harrison's eyes found her, Maya Rodriguez, age 24. Civilian background, degree in communications, below average on physical assessment. Psychological profile. Stable, unremarkable. Too unremarkable. It was a perfect cover. Harrison studied her photo. A face you'd forget in a crowd. But his instincts, honed through decades of war, screamed at him. The most dangerous were often the most forgettable. He stood. Formation, 10 minutes. The morning sun burned away mist as 12 recruits stood in stiff lines across the parade ground. Uniforms crisp, boots polished, to anyone else. They looked like exactly what they were supposed to be. Raw soldiers in training, but Harrison wasn't anyone else. He walked slowly, eyes scanning. Posture, breathing, micro-expressions, stress left fingerprints on bodies. The twitch of a hand. The quiver of an eyelid. Every recruit showed it. Sleepless night. Gunfire still echoing in their ears. Trauma etched into skin. All except one. Maya stood third from the left. Rifle steady, breathing calm, her face. Calm, patient, unreadable. Not the rigid stiffness of someone trying to appear strong. The relaxed readiness of someone who'd lived inside combat long enough for it to become her heartbeat. Harrison felt his stomach tighten. He stopped in front of Jackson. Rough night. Son? Yes, sir, but we followed orders, sir. Stayed in the barracks like we were told. All of you? Jackson's eyes flicked sideways, toward Maya, before jerking back. Yes, sir, all of us. Harrison moved down the line similar. Answers, consistent lies, and then he reached her, up close. She was even more ordinary. Average height, slight build, dark hair pulled back without care. The kind of recruit most drill sergeants would forget after a week. But Harrison didn't look at surfaces. He looked at truths. And what he saw made his pulse quicken. Her stance wasn't learned. It was lived. Her eyes carried decades, not months. And beneath the cuff of her sleeve, just visible in the slant of sunlight, the mark. He reached forward without warning, fingers grasping her wrist. His sleeve slid back. There it was, a serpent coiled to strike. Burned so deep into flesh, it seemed alive. Not ink, not decoration. A scar forged with methods that belonged only to the most secretive hands. Harrison's breath left him. His whisper carried across the parade ground, soft as smoke, heavy as thunder. That's a black viper mark. The effect was instant. The line of recruits stiffened, eyes wide, jaw slack. The name carried weight even in rumor. Black vipers weren't people. They were legends, ghosts, shadows that governments pretended didn't exist. Jackson went pale, as if the blood drained. Straight through his boots, Stevens actually stumbled backward. Morrison's throat clicked with a swallowed whimper, but Maya didn't move, didn't blink. She held her calm like a blade pressed flat against her chest. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. Harrison let her wrist go, his own hand trembling despite himself. Memories of missions unsolved clawed at him, whispers of operators who vanished into crowds, kill counts classified beyond presidential clearance. He swallowed. How many? Her eyes met his, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. What looked back at him wasn't a recruit, wasn't even a soldier. It was something older, colder, without mercy. 17 confirmed, she said softly. 3 extractions. 2 deep cover operations, over a year each. The parade ground stilled, only wind moved, rattling leaves like restless ghosts. Jackson's mouth fell open. Stevens pressed his trembling hands together. Morrison stared at the ground, unable to meet her eyes. The woman they had mocked, humiliated, laughed at in showers, bet against in bunks. She wasn't a recruit. She wasn't prey. She was death itself, wearing human skin. Agent Serpent. Harrison whispered. Maya gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. But it was enough. Silence became suffocating. The other recruits' faces twisted between awe and terror. The woman they'd treated like a joke had been watching them all along, memorizing every weakness, every cruelty. She'd chosen restraint. And now they knew why. Jackson found his voice first, broken raw. You're really... Maya turned her head, her smile cut sharper than glass. Hello. Jackson, did you sleep well last night? He flinched, remembering shredded boots, destroyed gear, serpents drawn by his bunk. Remembering that she'd never needed to fight back. She'd been letting them live. Harrison cleared his throat, grounding the weight back into himself. Sergeant Kane, dismiss the recruits. Agent Serpent and I need a conversation. Kane barked, sending the lines scattering. None of them looked her in the eye as they passed. Stevens kept his gaze on his boots. Morrison gave her a wide berth. Jackson opened his mouth as if to apologize, then thought better and hurried away when the ground cleared. Harrison stood face to face with her, a woman who had just shattered everything he thought he knew. How long? He asked quietly. 6 weeks. 3 active observation. Mission. Parameters? Evaluate training effectiveness, identify vulnerabilities, assess recruits' psychological profiles under stress. Harrison exhaled slowly. It made sense. In the twisted way intelligence operations always made sense. Send a ghost into the farthest into the barracks, see if the system could spot her. It hadn't. And last night? He pressed. Her eyes sharpened. Hostiles breached perimeter. 6 professionals. Inside knowledge of base layout. Threat level. Imminent. I acted within mission parameters. You broke cover. I preserved the mission. Her tone never wavered. The recruit's safety was paramount. Harrison studied her. The stillness, the hidden violence, the patience of something waiting coiled. His words came like stone. Your cover's blown now. The whole base will know by evening. Her smile was faint, cold. Colonel, my cover was blown the moment you said my call sign out loud. Meaning? Meaning the real training is about to begin. And as she walked away, disappearing back into the morning mist, Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. The recruits thought they were learning to be soldiers. They didn't realize they had been sharing quarters with a predator, and now the predator had a name. Why was the mess hall suddenly silent whenever she walked in? By 1400 hours, the story had burned across Fort Blackstone faster than wildfire. Every recruit, every instructor, every cook and janitor knew it now. Maya Rodriguez, the failing recruit, who couldn't climb a rope, was no ordinary soldier. She was Agent Serpent, a black viper, a living ghost from the kind of file folders locked behind vault doors. The name alone carried gravity. Soldiers who'd fought in deserts and jungles lowered their voices when they spoke it. Black vipers weren't supposed to exist, and yet one of them had eaten in the same mess hall, showered in the same barracks, bled in the same mud. At dinner, Maya sat where she always did. Corner table, back to the wall. She ate slowly, methodically, head slightly lowered. Nothing about her had changed outwardly. No fanfare, no boast, just quiet. But around her, the entire hall shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks clinked awkwardly against metal trays. Soldiers who'd once ignored her now watched with reverence, their gazes flicking toward her like they might burn themselves if they stared too long. Even the kitchen staff moved with exaggerated care, setting trays down softer, stepping lighter, as if noise itself might offend her. But it was the recruits who revealed the deepest fracture. Jackson entered first, his swagger gone, the mountain of muscle who once laughed the loudest now moved with the cautious steps of a man navigating a minefield. He scanned the room, spotted Maya immediately, and froze. For a second, he looked like he might walk the other way, but pride, or maybe shame, carried him forward. Stevens followed, hands trembling so badly his tray rattled. His nervous energy, once a weapon he wielded to mock her, now shook him apart. He sat as far away as possible, though his eyes kept darting back to her. Morrison trailed behind, pale as parchment, jaw tight. He touched his throat unconsciously, remembering the showers, the scalding water, the way she had looked at him without fear, remembering that she'd memorized every scar, every weakness, remembering that she had chosen not to kill him. They sat together, but not together. Their eyes dropped to their trays. Food untouched, every few seconds one of them glanced at her, only to look away when her gaze lifted. Stevens whispered, voice breaking, "She's been watching us this whole time." Jackson pressed his fork against his plate until it bent. "Those drawings. The serpent by our bunks. That wasn't a prank. That was a message." Morrison's throat clicked. "What kind of message?" Jackson looked up, his eyes dark with realization that she could have ended us any time she wanted, and we wouldn't. "I've even seen it coming." The weight of it settled over them like lead. Weeks of laughter and cruelty, of shaving cream pranks and shredded uniforms. All of it reframed. They hadn't been tormenting the weak. They'd been baiting a predator, and the predator had chosen restraint. At 1500 hours, the entire base gathered in the main auditorium. The seats overflowed with uniforms. Recruits, officers, seasoned NCOs, even kitchen staff standing in the back. Whispers buzzed like static until Colonel Harrison took the podium, his presence silencing the room. "Last night," he began, voice deep, carrying to every corner, "this base was attacked by 6 professional terrorists. These were not amateurs. These were trained killers with military-grade equipment and inside knowledge of our security protocols." A ripple of murmurs. Fear, confusion, they were neutralized. Harrison continued, his tone sharpening. "By a single operator, no hostages harmed. No friendly casualties, surgical precision." Silence swallowed the room, all eyes searching. Who? Who among them had done it? Harrison let the pause stretch until anticipation became unbearable. Then, "That operator has been living among us for 6 weeks, training with our recruits, eating in our mess hall, sweeping in our barracks." Heads turned, scanning faces, doubt, suspicion. Then disbelief. "Agent Serpent," Harrison said. "Please stand." Maya rose. The room went still. She looked exactly as she always had, forgettable, average, a face no one noticed until it was too late. But now every uniform in the hall understood what lived beneath that mask. "Agent Serpent is a Black Viper operative," Harrison said. "Her mission was to evaluate our training programs, identify weaknesses, and assess psychological resilience under stress. Last night, when this base was threatened, she chose to act at the cost of her cover. Every person in this room owes her their life. Applause began, hesitant, awkward. Then it swelled. Officers stood. Soldiers clapped until the wall shook. For the first time in weeks, Maya wasn't ignored. She was elevated, and yet, she stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Applause didn't move her. Praise didn't touch her. Her eyes scanned the room not for gratitude, but for exits, threats, shadows that might conceal danger. She wasn't built for applause. Applause was noise, and noise got people killed. That evening, recruits found her again in the mess hall. This time, Jackson approached her table, moving like a man approaching a loaded weapon. His tray clattered as he set it down. Maya. His voice faltered. His bulk seemed small now. I need to apologize for everything, the things we said, the things we did. We didn't know. She didn't look up. You didn't know what I was, she said evenly. But you knew what you were doing. He swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, we did, and there's no excuse. Finally, she lifted her eyes. Her gaze cut through him, quiet but merciless. Tell me, Jackson, what did you learn? He hesitated, thought, chose. His words like they mattered, because they did. That strength isn't always size or muscle. Bad. The most dangerous people are the ones you don't see coming, and that how you treat someone when you think they're weak says everything about who you are. Maya studied him long enough for his throat to tighten, his chest to pound. Then, she nodded once. Those are good lessons. The question is, what will you do with them? Jackson lowered his head. Earn them. She turned back to her meal. Then start tomorrow. The days that followed reshaped Fort Blackstone. Maya began leading advanced sessions, not the ego-driven punishments of Sergeant Kane, but precision-crafted lessons in survival. She taught recruits to move through darkness like water, to read shadows, to hear silence, to treat every corner as both refuge and trap. She forced them to unlearn the obvious, to see strength not in volume, but in patience, not in muscle, but in silence. Jackson threw himself into it, sweat pouring, pushing harder than anyone. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced by humility. His redemption wasn't in words. It was in bruises, in blisters, in refusing to stop. Stevens absorbed every detail with surprising sharpness. His nervous energy became a gift, fueling his rapid learning. The betting slips and cruel jokes were gone. He became the first to volunteer, the first to risk, the first to stay after hours to practice. Even Morrison, whose cruelty had been sharpest, shifted. The malice drained from him, replaced by quiet discipline. No swagger, no jokes, just work, and the change spread. Soldiers across the base began looking at each other differently, wondering what stories their comrades hid beneath plain surfaces, respecting the possibility that the ordinary might not be ordinary at all. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in the same courtyard where she had first arrived. Sun blazing, recruits stumbling off a transport bus, faces tight with fear. She watched quietly, arms folded. Beside her, Colonel Harrison stood, hands clasped behind his back. Thinking about the old days? He asked. Her smile was faint, knowing, thinking about the future. Which one? She tilted her chin toward the new recruits. Third one off the bus, small, quiet, trying not to be noticed. Harrison followed her gaze. A young woman stepped onto the pavement, clutching her bag too tight, shrinking from the other's eyes. Reminds you of someone? He asked. Maybe. Maya's eyes glinted. Or maybe she's exactly what she looks like. A scared recruit trying to survive. And if she's not... She let the silence linger, a shadow curling at the edge of her voice. She revealed herself when the time is right. As the recruits filed inside, Maya noticed Jackson and Stevens subtly shift, positioning themselves near the quiet girl. Protective, watchful, lessons taken to heart. That night, Maya paused outside the new barracks, Through the window, she saw the girl sitting alone, nervous. Small under the fluorescent glare, Maya smiled, fading back into the shadows. Cycle was beginning again, but this time, the mice wouldn't be alone. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply acts. Why did her lessons feel less like training and more like survival borrowed from another world? By the second week after her reveal, the recruits no longer thought of Maya Rodriguez as one of them. She wasn't a peer. She wasn't a fellow soldier clawing her way through the mud. She was something else entirely, a shadow teaching them how to walk in darkness. At dawn, they gathered on the range. The air was heavy with humidity, rifles slick in their hands, where Sergeant Kane once barked insults. Maya spoke little, her silence cut deeper than words. When she did speak, her tone carried weight that made every recruit stand straighter. "Targets are easy," she said quietly, almost to herself. "People are harder, in fog, in rain, in fear. You won't see their faces. You'll see movements, shadows, patterns." She placed them into formation, and then dismantled it. Again, until muscle memory replaced thought. Until the recruits moved like a single living organism. Jackson sweated through his shirt, but he didn't complain. His shoulders burned, legs trembling, yet he reset every time she ordered it. Stevens kept pace, surprising himself with how quickly his nerves sharpened into instinct. Morrison said nothing, but his precision grew cold, clean, professional. And Maya, she never shouted, never cursed. Her power wasn't in volume. It was in the precision of her presence. Later that day, she took them into the forest. Forget the course, forget the range. Out here, there are no whistles, no stopwatches, just silence. Learn to hear it. The woods pressed close, humid and alive with unseen movement. She scattered the recruits, then disappeared herself. Hours bled into dusk. At first, they tried to track her by sound. Branches snapping, leaves crunching, but she left nothing. No broken twigs, no disturbed soil. Then she struck, not cruelly, but with lessons carved into shock. Jackson felt his rifle tugged from his hands before he even realized she was behind him. Stevens froze when a cold whisper brushed his ear. "Your breathing's too loud." Morrison found his boots bound together by rope he hadn't noticed, forcing him face first into the dirt. When they regrouped at nightfall, sweat-soaked and exhausted, she looked at them with calm eyes. "You survived only because I allowed it. Remember that feeling. Respect it. One day, it won't be me." None of them laughed. The change didn't stop with the recruits. Across the base, whispers grew. Word of what she had done during the attack spread beyond Fort Blackstone's gates, rippling through military channels like a signal no one wanted to acknowledge. At first, it was disbelief. Then it became awe. Special Forces operators who thought they'd seen everything spoke her name in hushed tones. Commanders who once dismissed her as a nobody now avoided her gaze, unsettled by the idea that one woman had dismantled a team of trained killers in under 20 minutes. She ignored it. Titles meant nothing. Recognition was noise. But she noticed how soldiers watched her differently now. Not just with reverence, but with fear. Some respected her. Some envied her. Others prayed never to cross her path. In the mess hall, silence followed her still, but silence of a different kind. Not mockery, not disdain. Silence edged with unease. Maya sat alone, as she always had. But now it was by choice. Training escalated. One night, she led them into the obstacle course again. But this time, she gave no instructions, only one sentence: survive. Smoke bombs ignited. Sirens blared. Floodlights flared on and off in random intervals. Gunfire cracked from hidden speakers. Recruits stumbled, shouted, panicked, until Maya struck. She moved through them like a ghost, knocking rifles aside, yanking helmets down over eyes, dragging one recruit into the mud before releasing him with a hissed word: dead. By the end, they lay gasping in the dirt, humiliated and broken. She stood above them, calm, steady. Your enemy will not warn you. He will not care about your fear. He will not give you time to prepare. You panic, you die. You think you're too tired. You die. You assume it's safe. You die. Jackson, chest heaving, forced himself onto one knee. Then how do we live? Her eyes locked on his. For the first time, her voice softened, almost human. You live by respecting silence, by remembering that every shadow may hold teeth, by knowing that strength is not muscle, not size, not pride. It is awareness, patience, control. Her words sank into the mud with them. No one argued. Over the following weeks, change took root. Jackson no longer strutted. His arrogance bled out of him, replaced with humility that bordered on reverence. He studied her every move, repeating drills until his body screamed. It wasn't pride that drove him now. It was redemption. Stevens, once the nervous fidgeter, found his edge in analysis. He began noticing details others missed. The shift of wind, the weight of silence. His questions sharpened. His mistakes became rarer. He turned nervous energy into calculation. Even Morrison, whose cruelty had once defined him, shifted into quiet professionalism. No more mockery, no more petty games. He spoke little, moved cleanly, and obeyed without hesitation. Maya didn't praise them. She didn't comfort them. She simply taught, and in her silence, they discovered who they truly were. But not everyone welcomed her presence. Kane bristled, humiliated. His authority, once absolute, now diminished each time recruits obeyed her without hesitation. He watched from the sidelines, fists clenched, eyes narrow. One night he cornered Harrison. "Sir, with respect, she's dangerous. Too dangerous. She undermines structure. She saved this base," Harrison interrupted, voice cold. "She's teaching lessons you couldn't." Kane stiffened, jaw tight. "She's making them fear her, not respect her." Harrison's eyes flicked toward the training yard, where recruits moved in silence, following her hand signals through shadows. Sometimes, fear teaches faster than comfort. And if you can't see the value in that, Sergeant, maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here. Kane swallowed his retort, but his glare lingered. Maya noticed. She always noticed. One evening, as the recruits packed their gear, Stevens lingered. His voice trembled, but he forced the words out. Why do you do this? You don't need us. You could be anywhere." She studied him, silent for long moments. Then, "Because I know what it's like to be underestimated, to be treated as less than human, to be mocked, ignored, dismissed." Her gaze softened, barely. "But you don't overcome that by shouting, or proving them wrong with words. You overcome it by surviving, by outlasting, by refusing to break." Stevens swallowed hard. "And if we fail?" Her eyes darkened. "Then you die, and someone else learns from your mistakes." He nodded slowly, the weight settling heavy on his chest. That night, Maya walked the perimeter alone. The base was quiet, but she didn't believe in quiet. Silence was always a mask. She scanned shadows, listening for truths others missed. At the far edge of the compound, she paused, eyes narrowing at the distant horizon. Storm clouds gathered again. And in her wrist, the scar pulsed faintly, as if reminding her. The shadows were never gone. They only waited. The recruits thought their lessons were about crawling under wire, moving through fog, firing rifles straight. But the real training hadn't even begun, not for them, not for her, not for what was coming. Why did the past always return, no matter how deep you buried it? By late autumn, Fort Blackstone no longer resembled the place Maya had first stepped into. The recruits who once laughed at her now moved like soldiers. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by discipline carved from humility. Jackson had become the quiet anchor of the group. Stevens the observer with sharp eyes, Morrison the steady hand. They weren't perfect, but they were no longer children. Still, The silence of respect that now surrounded Maya didn't erase the whispers that trailed behind her. Rumors bled into mess halls, into smoke breaks, into the corridors late at night. Some said she'd dismantled a cartel cell single-handed in Caracas. Others claimed she'd slipped through 3 layers of Taliban strongholds without firing a shot. There were darker whispers, too. Missions so black they didn't exist on paper. Names of men who had disappeared without graves. And always, the same name rose with them. Black Viper. The title carried weight heavier than any medal. A ghost division that soldiers feared as much as they admired. But for Maya, the rumors were chains. Every whisper pulled at memories she had buried deep. Memories of faces she couldn't forget. Voices that screamed in silence. Choices she had made that could never be unmade. She had come here to hide in plain sight. Now her mask had shattered. Kane's resentment festered like rot. He watched from the sidelines as recruits obeyed her wordlessly, as even officers deferred to her presence. Where once he was the law of the yard, now he was an afterthought. His pride had been gutted, and pride was all Kane ever had. Late one night, he sat in the barracks office, a bottle sweating in his fist, eyes red. The room stank of frustration. Cigarette smoke curling into the rafters. On his desk lay a file, thick, stamped with restricted clearances he'd stolen access to. Rodriguez Maya. He flipped the pages, but most were redacted, lines of black ink that erased her history. Still, fragments bled through. Covert ops, confirmed kills, missions tagged, eyes only. Enough to paint a picture he didn't want to believe. She's a liability. He muttered to the empty room. She shouldn't be here. She's dangerous. But in the same breath, envy twisted his gut. Dangerous was what he wanted to be. The colonel sensed it before anyone else. Harrison had spent too many years reading soldiers' faces not to notice Kane's seething, the way his jaw tightened when Maya entered a room, the way his words curdled when her name was mentioned. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Harrison cornered him outside the motor pool. "You've got a problem, Sergeant?" Kane straightened, caught between fear and defiance. "With respect, sir." "Yes, I do. That woman is poisoning this base. The recruits don't fear me anymore. They worship her like some kind of ghost." "Maybe because she earned it," Harrison said evenly. Kane's eyes flared. "She undermines the chain of command. She's not one of us. She's a spook, and spooks don't belong here." Harrison stepped closer, voice a quiet threat. "Careful, Sergeant. Spooks are the reason you still have a base to stand on. If she hadn't been here, you'd be a corpse rotting in that storm." Kane's fists clenched, but he said nothing. Harrison leaned in, his whisper sharp. "You're not angry because she's dangerous. You're angry because she's better. And that's something you'll have to live with." The colonel walked away, leaving Kane's pride shattered at his feet. But broken pride can be the most dangerous weapon. Outside threats never stayed outside for long. It started with chatter, fragments intercepted by intelligence analysts, anonymous voices on encrypted channels, mentions of Fort Blackstone, descriptions of a woman who sounded too familiar, Vibra Negra, Black Viper. Maya's blood chilled when Harrison brought the report to her quarters. He laid the transcripts on her desk, his eyes heavy with concern. "They know you're here," he said. She read the lines, her jaw tight. It wasn't vague rumor. These were operatives who had studied her, hunted her, men who had lost comrades to her silence, who wanted retribution. "They're coming," she murmured. Harrison's silence was confirmation. "Then we move the recruits," she said, his brow furrowed. "We can't uproot the entire base for a rumor." Her eyes snapped up, colder than steel. "This isn't rumor, Colonel. This is blood debt. They won't stop, not until one of us is in the ground." Harrison leaned back, studying her. For the first time, he saw not just the operative, but the exhaustion beneath, the scars no one could see. "You've been running a long time, haven't you?" he asked softly. She said nothing. Silence was her only answer. That night, Maya found herself outside the barracks, watching the recruits sleep through thin glass windows. Jackson sprawled heavy on his bunk, muscles finally at rest. Stevens lay curled tight, as if bracing for nightmares. Morrison's breathing was steady, calm, the rhythm of someone who had learned discipline the hard way. They looked like soldiers now, but to her, they would always be the kids who once laughed at her in showers, who tested her patience with cruelty, and still, she felt a strange kind of pride. Not because they'd changed, but because they had learned. For weeks, she had poured her ghosts into them, teaching them what silence meant, what patience cost, and in their eyes now, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. She whispered to the glass, "Don't waste it." Then she turned, scanning the darkness at the edges of the base. Somewhere out there, men were coming, and this time, she wasn't sure the storm would pass without blood. Kane watched from the shadows. He had followed her without sound, his bitterness feeding on every step she took. In his pocket, he carried a burner phone. On it, a number, a connection. He never should have made, but envy twists judgment into betrayal. He pressed the keys, spoke softly, "She's here." And with that call, he invited the wolves to the door. The first sign came 3 nights later. A sentry on the west perimeter reported movement beyond the wire, shadows flitting between trees. Too far to confirm, too close to ignore. Then went dark. Within minutes, half the cameras failed. Maya felt it before she heard it. A stillness. That wasn't natural. The kind of silence that arrives just before violence. She strapped her rifle, slid her blade into place. The storm was coming again, and this time, it wasn't about training, it was about survival. The recruits awoke to the sound of sirens. Not drills, not exercises real. Jackson grabbed his boots. Hard hammering, Stevens fumbled for his rifle, fear flooding old wounds. Morrison cursed under his breath, but his hands moved steady, precise. They'd been here before. They knew what it meant. But this time, they wouldn't be hiding in barracks. This time, Maya wouldn't fight alone. Why did silence always arrive first? Before death, before violence, before truth. The alarms still wailed, red lights strobing across concrete. But Maya knew the real warning had come minutes earlier. That unnatural quiet outside the wire. The vanishing of birdsong. The kind of stillness predators carried with them. They were here. She moved fast, her voice cutting through chaos as recruits stumbled awake. "Gear up. Live fire. This isn't a drill." Jackson's face blanched, but he pulled his vest tight. Stevens' hands shook as he loaded magazines, but he loaded them. Morrison's jaw clenched, steady, eyes dark with readiness. These weren't the same boys who had once mocked her. Fear still lived in them, but fear was no longer their master. The first shots cracked from the tree line. Muzzle flashes split the darkness. Bullets pinged against metal siding. The base roared awake, soldiers rushing into position. Maya dropped low, eyes scanning the perimeter. The enemy was coordinated. Too coordinated. She counted at least a dozen silhouettes moving with practiced precision. Professionals, mercenaries, men paid in blood. They hadn't come for Fort Blackstone. They had come for her. "Jackson!" she barked. "South flank. Take Stevens. Hold the corner by the motor pool. Morrison, with me." They didn't question. They obeyed. Rifles thundered. Shadows advanced. And for the first time, the recruits fought not as bullies, not as children, but as soldiers. Jackson covered Stevens as he scrambled behind cover. Stevens steadied, firing short controlled bursts. Morrison checked his corners. His aim clean. They weren't perfect, but they were alive. Kane emerged from the chaos, his voice cutting sharp. "Fall back. Everyone inside." "That's an order." Maya froze, her eyes narrowed. "You'll box them in? We hold them here." Kane's face twisted, fury masking fear. "I said fall back." Bullets ripped through the ground near their feet. Kane flinched, diving for cover. Maya didn't. She stayed low, steady, eyes scanning the tree line. And then she saw it. A shadow that didn't belong. Not enemy, not ally. Kane's burner phone. Slipping from his vest as he crawled. Screen cracked. Call log glowing faintly. Her stomach turned to ice. He hadn't just been angry. He had brought them here. She didn't. Speak it aloud. Not yet. Truths like that had their time. Instead, she rose in the fire. She moved like smoke, a blur in the chaos. Her rifle spat once, twice. 2 silhouettes dropped. She slid behind cover, reloaded, shifted angles. Morrison followed her lead. Steady as stone, Jackson's voice cracked through coms. We're holding the south corner. 2 down, 1 wounded. Keep breathing, Maya said, calm as if reading a bedtime story. Fear lies to you. Focus on truth. Truth is cover. Truth is fire. Truth is survival. Her voice steadied them more than bullets did. Minutes stretched like hours. The attackers pressed harder. Grenades burst, shattering earth. A spotlight exploded in sparks. The base trembled with violence. Still, Maya moved, efficient, silent, not superhuman. Human sharpened to a blade. She chose. Angles, not glory. Timing, not chaos. Always protecting the recruits first. Always shielding, guiding, shaping. And the recruits rose with her. Stephen's aim grew sharper, his fear melting into instinct. Jackson roared into the fight, not with arrogance, but with courage. Morrison fought clean, disciplined, no wasted movement. They were still alive. Then came the breach. Explosives tore through the east gate, fire swallowing steel. A wave of mercenaries surged inside. Too many, too fast. Kane stumbled forward, panic in his eyes. We're overrun. We have to run. Maya turned on him, calm even as bullets snapped overhead. You brought them here. His breath caught, eyes wide. Where are you? She pointed to the phone still glowing in his pocket. The truth was ablaze between them. Kane stammered, face pale. I didn't mean, I thought. You thought you could control wolves, she said coldly. Now they'll eat us all. A grenade clattered nearby. Without thinking, she shoved him aside. Throwing herself over it, the blast tore the ground. Shrapnel ripping across her vest, rattling bone. She gasped, staggered, but stayed on her feet. Kane gaped at her, guilt written across his face like fire. He opened his mouth, but words failed. She left him there. The battle raged into the barracks. Close quarters now, fists, knives, rifles at point blank. Soldiers screamed, shadows fell, blood-soaked dirt. Maya moved through it like a whisper of inevitability. A knife flashed, but she disarmed it. A rifle raised, but she jammed the muzzle, driving her blade clean. She wasn't flawless. Her arm bled, her side seared with pain. But she endured, always forward, always silent. And the recruits followed. At one point, Stevens froze. An enemy rifle leveled at him, his breath caught. Eyes wide, until Jackson shoved him aside, taking the shot across his vest. He groaned, falling, but lived. Maya was there in an instant, dropping the shooter with brutal efficiency. Her hand pressed against Jackson's chest. Steady. You're still breathing, she said. That means you're still fighting. His eyes blazed. He nodded. Hours felt like days, but dawn broke. The surviving mercenaries scattered as reinforcements arrived, fleeing into the forest with shadows at their backs. The base smoldered, broken but alive. Bodies lined the ground, blood-stained concrete. The air reeked of gunpowder and iron, and yet, among it, recruits stood, breathing, alive. Maya wiped her blade clean, the mark on her wrist burning faintly under the rising sun. She looked at Jackson, Stevens, Morrison, broken, bruised, bleeding, but upright. They had mocked her once, laughed at her, called her weak. Now they stood because of her, and because they had learned. Cain sat apart, head in his hands, trembling. No rank could shield him from truth now. His betrayal had brought death to their gates, and still she had saved him. He looked up as she passed, shame flooding his eyes. Why? His voice cracked. Why didn't you let me die? She paused, gaze unreadable. Because death is easy. Living with what you've done, that's harder. Her words cut deeper than any blade. He lowered his head. No defense, no escape. Only the weight of his own choices. Later, as medics tended wounds and smoke lifted, Colonel Harrison approached her. His face carried exhaustion, grief, and gratitude. You saved this base again, he said. She shook her head softly. No, they saved themselves. I just gave them the tools. He studied her. The quiet strength, the scars, the silence that never left. What happens now? She looked toward the recruits, huddled together, supporting each other's weight. Not boys anymore, not bullies, soldiers. They'll carry it forward, she said quietly. And me? She touched the scar on her wrist. The serpent coiled. Eternal, I'll disappear again. That's what we do. He nodded slowly. And if they laugh at the next one? Her eyes glinted. Then maybe they'll remember me. That evening, she walked the perimeter alone one last time. The sky was painted with smoke and fire, but in the distance, birds had returned. The silence had lifted. She paused, watching. The recruits through a window. Jackson with his chest wrapped, smiling despite pain. Stevens alive with nervous laughter. Morrison cleaning his rifle with steady hands. For a moment, she allowed herself something rare. A flicker of pride, not because she had won, but because they had learned. She turned away, melting into shadow. By the time the recruits looked for her, she was gone. No farewell, no salute, just absence. Because dignity doesn't announce its departure, it simply leaves, and in the quiet that followed, a truth lingered like smoke. Strength is not the roar of muscle, or the pride of rank, or the laughter of the crowd. Strength is the silence that endures mockery, the patience that outlasts cruelty, the resilience that survives storms, and teaches others to survive them too. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.